We're live.
Hit it, Dave.
All right. Good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of the Prince Hall Think Tank. My name is Dave Gillum. I'll be your host for the night. I am a past master of Mount Episcopal Lodge, number 53, located in Columbus, Georgia, where Johnny R. Williams serves our worship master. And I also have the pleasure of serving as the Grand Historian of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, when the Honorable Bruce A. James serves as our Most Worshipful Grand Master. For a disclaimer, the views and opinions that are expressed by us tonight in no way reflect the views and opinions of the Grand Lodges in which we hold membership. Now, to introduce the rest of the panelists, now I have to apologize. Something happens always before a show, and so I have to broadcast tonight from my phone. And Brother Preston Collins has another engagement, so he can't be here with us tonight as well. So to introduce the rest of the panelists, first we have Brother James Morgan.
Good evening, everybody. So happy to be back here with everybody here on the Prince Hall Think Tank. My name is James R. Morgan III. I currently serve as Worshipful Master of Corinthian Lodge number 18 here in the nation's capital of Washington, D.C. And I'm also the Worshipful Associate Grand Historian of the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge of the District of Columbia, where the Honorable Norman L. Campbell is our current Most Worshipful Grand Master, presiding over Prince Hall Masonry in the nation's capital. Once again, it is a pleasure and honor to be here on the Prince Hall Think Tank, and I want to continue to thank you all for all of your love and all your support that we are receiving. These past 11 months have been a great learning experience for me, and I'm sure that tonight we're going to make history once again. I'm going to kick it over to Brother Ken Collins for his introduction.
Good evening, everybody. I can't get my theme music queued up today, but I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, I'm Ken Collins. I serve as the Grand Historian for the Most Worshipful Prince Hall Grand Lodge, Free and Accepted Masons of Alabama, where Prince Hall Freemasonry is alive and well. I'm a member of Pride of North Birmingham Lodge number 319, where the Right Reverend Dr. Timothy Sanford is our Worshipful Master, and Corey D. Hawkins, Senior Esquire, is our Grand Master. I have to put a plug in every single time to thank them for the support and continued encouragement that they give for participating in this. And things are looking in good. Just a quick heads up as far as things are concerned. We really were looking forward to this particular episode, given the relationship between the AME, and James is going to go further into it, but I'm really glad to be on with you guys again today.
Thank you, Brother Collins. So for tonight, our purpose is to discuss the twin pillars from African Lodge to the AME Church. And something that has to be understood about Prince Hall Masonry from its earliest days, there's always been, and I think this is one of the things that kind of makes Prince Hall Masonic history unique, is the unique connection between the African lodges and the African American Church, particularly the AME Church. The reason why we decided to name this the Twin Pillars was because, in part, Prince Hall Freemasonry and the AME Church have grown up together from the earliest days. When you have Bishop Richard Allen, who is the founder of the AME Church, which has just celebrated its 200th anniversary just this past month. So that's another reason why we want to do this. But from the earliest days, when the AME Church was founded in the year 1816, right, there was already members such as Bishop Allen and several others who were also very active within the small yet growing movement of what was then called Negro Freemasonry. So we have to remember that, and anybody who's from the jurisdiction of Pennsylvania, you already have made a connection. 1815, Prince Hall Freemasonry in the state of Pennsylvania established the first independent African Grand Lodge, and then not even a year later, 1816, you see the birth of the AME Church, and they were founded basically for very similar reasons. Whereas Prince Hall and other Masons of African descent were not being accepted by Caucasian Masons, which was a very common thing, not just in Masonry, but throughout the society at that time. We also see in Philadelphia where you have Bishop Richard Allen, you have Absalom Jones, another very prominent and very active Prince Hall Mason and a man of faith. They're literally pulled from their knees at the white Methodist Church and told that they had to get out and go out into the streets. That they were no longer welcome there because that church at one time had said, well, all the Negroes had to stay in the balcony, and they said, well, no, we don't want to stay in the balcony. We want to praise the Lord the same way you want to praise the Lord. But they were not allowed to, so they were forced into creating their own institution, and eventually they came up with Mother Bethel AME Church, which is in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which now has an actual monument to Bishop Allen, and from there it spread. And one thing you'll find when you are studying the growth of either organization, whether it's Prince Hall Freemasonry or if you're studying the AME Church, you're going to find whenever you start seeing lodges pop up, you see an AME Church pop up. Whenever you see an AME Church pop up, you'll see a lodge pop up. And that's because there's a cross-fertilization between the leadership of the churches as well as leadership of the lodges. And that's just a part and parcel of Prince Hall Masonic history. And so we wanted to highlight that tonight, and especially in honor of the bicentennial of African Methodism in this country. So we are greatly honored to have you here with us, and I'm going to kick it over to Brother Gillon so we can get the party started.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Morgan. And next, we're going to get into our presentations for tonight. My first presentation will be done by Brother Ken Collins.
All right, everybody. Now, true to form, I'm going to step out and color outside the lines a little bit because James and Dave are going to delve particularly. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Just give me a head now. Okay. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to color outside the lines a little bit in particular in terms of the Methodism in turn associated with Prince Hall Masonry. And what we're also going to look at, and what I'm going to look at when I'm saying I'm coloring outside the lines in particular, is what I'm doing is I'm going to take a look at what's on the outskirts of what they consider the AME Church, and I'm going to take a quick look and delve into the CME Church, which sits on which some affectionately call, and I say with all due respect, the little brother of Methodism per se, particularly because it's one of the youngest organizations of the Methodists for persons of color. Okay, and particularly what I'm looking at is the association with Prince Hall Masonry, the CME Church, and also the intersection with the black colleges. Because at this time, we're starting to see, we're looking at James and Dave are looking at the AME Church, dealing from African Lodge in Philadelphia and Independent Grand Lodge of Philadelphia, and how it kind of translates and transcends time, and those membership are starting to spread the AME Church. But all through Prince Hall history, what we call the circuit riders, which are essentially a lot of the ministers that are going throughout the country, even during times of slavery, and spreading the good news about the gospel. In particular, they're establishing these Methodist churches throughout the country. So typically where you see a church pop up where they would have the tent revivals, you would also see a Prince Hall Lodge also accompanying it, because what typically would happen, and we talk about this in a lot of our conversations as historians, you start to see the same people, and they're the leaders in the lodge, but at the same time they're also leaders in commerce, education, and the community, but also they're also the leaders in the religious circles. And speaking with some other historians, what they said was typically when they had the tent revivals, you would end up seeing the ministers would get some of the most highly respected men in the local areas, and that's how some of the churches would then immediately be organized from those types of situations. But we're going to move really quickly through the CME Church. That way we can get into some of the meat of the conversation in terms of the AME Church itself. So the Colored Methodist Episcopal Church, what I like to call affectionately again the new kid on the block, was born after the end of the Civil War, particularly by ex-slaves. The Colored Methodist Church of the South was essentially the white church that also allowed the slaves and a small group of some of the freed blacks to attend service with them. The organization itself, with the Methodist Church South, they were working with the Africans, I say African Americans or blacks, to interact with them to basically teach them how to lead the congregations either back on the plantations or in their small separate segregations, which would have to be accompanied by the land by one of the owners of whites, because a lot of the southern churches would not allow not only the churches but also the civic institutions, as far as the sheriffs and the laws, would not allow blacks to assemble in numbers greater than 3 to 4 without a white being present. So early on, they were chastised. A lot of the Africans were chastised for congregating, and even the AME Zion chastised some of the blacks that were still either slaves and or free, that were still members of the Methodist Church South, because they were still in a subservient role. They could not lead churches. They were not allowed to actively participate and sit in the front of the pews, some of the same issues that they had with the AME Church. But early, again, after the close of the Civil War and emancipation came, the the Methodist Church South, they still allowed the blacks to interact with them. But what was happening is there was a swelling movement for the blacks to start their own church. What happens is the Methodist Church South's bishops, they became actively involved in training some of the early leaders of the CME Church on how to conduct church affairs, how things are ran. And then what we end up seeing is the church is formally organized in December of 1870, 5 years after the close of the Civil War. And what they end up doing, they establish the church, they get their districts set up, and they're actually, again, while they're the new kids on the block, they began to expand rapidly, in particular throughout the southern states. And going through some of their early history books, and one book called The History of the Colored Methodist Church in America, you end up seeing, and I think us as Freemasons would find it particularly interesting, that the CME Church calls itself the only regular independent Negro Methodist Church organization in the world. So that particular phrase is somewhat interesting, the way that they state their title, because some of the early members that we end up seeing, Bishop Payne, we end up seeing Bishop Lane, Reverend Williams, all these men are actually Freemasons themselves, but the terminology that they use to segregate themselves from the AME Church and the AME Zion Church is very particular to us as Freemasons. So, as we move on, the CME movement becomes extremely interested in the concept of education. While we have the birth of black colleges and universities, particularly set up by movers and shakers in the political arena, what we end up seeing with the CME movement is they're establishing churches associated particularly with their congregations and a lot of the people in their communities. And the CME Church is they had an extremely aggressive stance in initiating new churches throughout their areas. So we end up seeing them. They formed Lane College. They have Payne College, and here's the caveat: there are different Payne colleges. The AME Church has a Payne College. There's a AME Zion Payne College as well as a CME Payne College. The CMEs also started Mississippi Industrial College, Phillips College, and one of the most notable of all is Miles Memorial College, which we call Miles College today, located in Birmingham, Alabama. So what we'll look at next is, in particular, one of the most celebrated of the CME churches, universities, which is Miles College. So in 1898, the CME Church opens a school and a church in Thomasville, Alabama. So in Thomasville, they basically set up a schoolhouse for both elementary all the way up to what we consider a high school or finishing school, up into as well as an educational system of pre-college. But 4 years later, the CME Church also starts Booker City College there in a city called Booker City, which is what we consider Fairfield, Alabama. This school was up and running, and they were doing really well. Both schools were working independently, and then they were getting a lot of students in there. But what the CME Church was really looking at was establishing one of the larger institutions. And what they did in 1907, what we end up seeing is what we can see now as the Miles College of today. Miles College is a thriving university located right there just outside the outskirts of Birmingham, the greater metropolitan Birmingham, and it sits on its own campus. It's a beautiful school. And early on in the early teens, the school's dormitory actually burns down, and the community takes in their boarding students, and they rebuild the university. And as they're rebuilding the university, they're starting to get more and more buy-in from the local community. Miles College, unlike any of the other colleges, are early on in the late 1800s, as well as the early teens, involved in the civil rights movement. This school, if a lot of people haven't looked into it, there's a PBS special talking about Miles College, where it's actually Miles College student that sparks a lot of the sit-ins, in particular involving, they shut the city of Birmingham down, dealing with the civil rights movement with their boycott. Now, again, we like to talk about the ties, in particular, of the leadership of the Prince Hall Masonic fraternity, but also with the CME Church, and in particular with Miles College. The leaders there in the university at Miles were Prince Hall Masons. So we have Reverend R.S. Williams is the president of the university, but he's also a member of Rising Sun Lodge out of Montgomery, number 10. We also have Reverend J.M. Nobles, who's also the principal of Rising Sun, number 10. And then we also have Reverend T.H. Williams, who's a member of George Braxtall Lodge, number 28, located in Decatur, Alabama. So when I talk about the relationship between Prince Hall Masonry and the university, we had a conversation with another researcher, and he brought the connotation up that too often that people like to associate being Prince Hall Masons and the good things that happen in the community, it happened because they were Prince Hall Mason. But I argue with him is that is in fact the case, because and the only justification I can say with that is there are a lot of times that Prince Hall Masons interact with each other because we're Prince Hall Masons. We'll call a Mason in another state and bounce it off of them, even though it may be associated with something work-related. So that relationship there is based not only off of the fraternal friendships and the professional friendships, but a lot of those conversations can take place behind closed doors. I'll wrap this up really fast. This past February, during the African American History Month, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama partnered with Miles College for the French Lyceum series, which is basically a lecture series over civil rights, and we invited Congressman John Lewis there. Congressman John Lewis, of course, is a member of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia, but he also one of the stalwart key players of the civil rights movement. And in particular, the relationship that Miles College has with the civil rights movement, we also see something that happened that was extremely exciting for us, is that the president of Miles College, Dr. George T. French, was initiated, passed, and raised as a Master Mason. He was made at site this past year at the university. So it's kind of coming full circle where the relationship with the churches and Prince Hall Freemasonry, not only that, but also the delving into the civil rights movement, things are kind of brought full circle. So that's what I wanted to bring to the team today, just to discuss on the outskirts of Prince Hall Freemasonry. And I hope that you guys got a little bit to glean off of that as something a little bit different with me coloring outside of the lines.
Thank you for that, Brother Collins. That
Appreciate
was very, very inspirational, and I can say I learned a thing or two. And actually, I know you guys don't know this, or most of you guys at home don't know. In 2010, I actually did a study abroad program when I got to go to Egypt. This was literally a week after I had been raised as a Master Mason, and that was actually a joint program with my alma mater, Howard University, and several other institutions, one of which was actually Miles College. So I learned a thing or two about that school while I was there, but I definitely learned some more about the history tonight, and I want to say thank you for that. We did get a question in for you, Brother Collins. I want to make sure I don't leave it out. Was there any, in your research, any connection with the AME Zion Church? I see people online, some of our fans online talking about James Walker Hood of North Carolina. Are you aware of any AME Zion connections in Alabama or elsewhere with Prince Hall Masonry?
There are, in particularly the relationship with Prince Hall Masonry and the AME Zion Church. Simon S. Ash, again, he's a name that we constantly go back to in our early history. Simon Ash is one of the earliest documented members. There's two different histories that I always hear with the AME Church, particularly in the state of Alabama, and James is going to go over that. There's two different stories. Some say that the first AME churches were in Dothan. However, there's a documented history of an AME church in Mobile early on in the 1820s, even before some of the early conversations with the AME Church. But there's Simon S. Ash is actually documented. There's documented evidence there where he's at some of the early AME Zion formulation in Alabama, but he also later in his life, early in his life and later in his life, is associated with the AME Church with his work with Bishop Henry McNeil Turner.
Thank you for that, sir. We greatly appreciate you clarifying that. Now we're going to move on to Brother Gillarm for his presentation. Let me see here. Go ahead, Brother Gillarm.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Morgan. I have to apologize to everybody once again. My presentation will be up within the next 24 to 48 hours. And right now I just have my notes, and I'm going kind of off the top of my head about the connection between the AME Church and Prince Hall Masonry in the great state of Georgia. So when I start looking at the history of AME Church in Georgia, it starts to appear in the city of Savannah shortly after the end of the Civil War. The Methodist Church South now has a couple of ministers in the names of Reverend James Lynch, William Bentley, Charles Bradwell, and William Gaines. Now, if you're familiar with Special Field Order Number 15, commonly known as 40 Acres and a Mule, Reverend Charles Bradwell and Reverend William Gaines were both at that meeting, which led to General Sherman issuing the Special Field Order number 15. And then when I started comparing the spread of the AME Church throughout the state of Georgia and how our lodges expanded, you can almost mirror the two. with our lodges starting in Savannah, then going to Augusta, Columbus, then Atlanta. That almost follows the exact same pattern as the AME Church. So the AME Church, the first AME Church in the state of Georgia was St. Philip's, which is located in the city of Savannah. This church was established on June 16, 1865, with their first pastor being Reverend Anthony L. Stanford. After Anthony L. Stanford does his time in Georgia, he ends up in Arkansas, where he gets involved in politics. From Arkansas, he ends up in Liberia. This is during the time when the back to Liberia movement was going. So he gets with Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, and they're establishing churches in Africa. So to go back to Reverend Stanford and his connection to St. Philip's AME, this church was the powerhouse for AME Church, for Methodism in the state of Georgia. So at this church, not only did you have Reverend Stanford, you had Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, you had Reverend Charles C. Cargyle. Now, if you're familiar with the sorority Delta Sigma Theta, his daughter is Winona Cargyle Alexander. She was one of the founders of Delta Sigma Theta. So you have all these ministers that's right there at St. Philip's. So now we need to spread Methodism around the state. So the second church, before I move on to the second church, so also at this church, not only do you have Reverend Stanford, who becomes the first pastor of the first AME church in the state of Georgia, he also becomes the first worship master of Eureka Lodge number 11, which is now Eureka Lodge number 1, which is the first Masonic Lodge first Prince Hall Masonic Lodge established in the state. So you always, when they start off with that connection. You have the first pastor also becomes the first worship master. And then for the Order Eastern Star, which gets established later in 1899, the first Grand Worthy Matron, Dorothy Edwards, was also a member of St. Philip's AME. So now you have on the OES side, you have the first Grand Worthy Matron, who also belonged to the AME Church. So now it's time for these men to expand. And the second church they established in the state was located here in the city of Columbus, which is St. James AME. And also the location of this church now is literally footsteps from the Prince Hall Masonic Temple. So the AME Church, St. James AME Church, is now established, and some of the ministers that come are Bishop Wesley John Gaines, Reverend C.C. Cargyle comes, and Reverend Charles Bradwell. Reverend Charles Bradwell is important because the first lodge that gets established in the city of Columbus becomes under dispensation in 1870 and chartered in 1871 is Bradwell Lodge number 4. So we have Eureka Lodge number 1 in Savannah. You have Hilton Lodge number 2, which is also located in Savannah. Banneker Lodge number 3, with the men that started that church was members of the Methodist Episcopal Church. And Reverend Robert T. Kent was one of the leaders of Banneker Lodge, and he was made a Mason in the city of Philadelphia. So now the 4th lodge gets established in the city of Columbus, and it's named after Reverend Charles L. Bradwell. So now when we look at what a church establishes next, it takes us to the city of Atlanta with Big Bethel AME. And their first pastor was Reverend Joseph Woods. And you can also guess that the fifth lodge that was established in the state of Georgia was St. James AME. And some of these men that started St. James AME were also AME ministers. So now we have, so basically to wrap that portion up, you have the AME Church spreading from Savannah to Columbus and to Atlanta. And then you follow the Masonic lodges. They go from Savannah, Columbus, and Atlanta. So I found that kind of interesting, and you can kind of follow that pattern with when you go to Macon, you go to Thomasville, you go to Darien. Everywhere there was an AME church popping up, a Masonic lodge surely follow. And some of these same men, such as Reverend Bradwell, he starts in Savannah, he comes to Columbus, to help start a lodge here. Then he ends up in Big Bethel. So that seemed to be their path. They would go Savannah, Columbus, Atlanta, then end up in Macon. Then they would go to various parts of the state. And a couple of the men that we could talk about as far as being AME ministers in the state of Georgia. One people I posted about was Bishop Henry McNeil Turner. Bishop Henry McNeil Turner was a member of Pythagoras Lodge number 13, which is now Pythagoras number 11. He was the first African American chaplain of the Union Army. He was one of the leaders in the Back to Liberia movement, and you all probably saw a quote that I mentioned that I posted of Bishop Turner's, where he's talking. It's from 1895, and the sermon was titled "God is a Negro." Now he's speaking to people just 30 years removed from slavery, where lynches were happening left and right. Bishop Turner was also he was a target of the Klan, and what he was trying to do was instill pride in blacks, but saying that every other race can picture God as a member of their race. So why can't you, as a black man, picture God as a black man? So he was really trying to instill black pride. The first person I'm going to get to is Bishop Archibald J. Carey. Bishop Archibald J. Carey graduated from Atlanta University at the age of 20 in 1889. Atlanta University is now known as Clark Atlanta. And now in 1888, he gets licensed to preach. So shortly after being licensed to preach, he gets accepted into the North Georgia Annual Conference under Bishop Wesley John Gaines, who was a member of, as I stated earlier, Phoenix Lodge number 13 in Macon, Georgia. And after being accepted to the conference, he gets married, and now he gets sent to Athens to become the first worship master of Lincoln Lodge number 62. And as far as the AME Zion connection in Georgia, if I remember correctly, the deputy for that area was Reverend Cornelius Max Manning, who was a member of the AME Zion Church. So once he becomes a member of this conference, which is the head of it is another Prince Hall Mason, they sent him out to Athens to become worship master of the first worship master of a new lodge shortly after he graduates college and right after he gets married. Now, after he does his time in Athens, he ends up pastoring Big Bethel AME in 1891. He stays there for a number of years, and he ends up in Chicago in 1898, and he pastors Quinn Chapel AME, which, if I remember correctly, is one of the oldest black churches in the city of Chicago. So he spends out the rest of his time there. One of his son, Archibald J. Carey Jr., now he gets really heavily involved in politics, and it's rumored that Dr. King actually plagiarized Archibald J. Carey Sr.'s speech. I believe it was the I've been to the mountaintop speech that Dr. King was, as quote unquote, supposed to have plagiarized that from Bishop Carey's son. And Bishop Carey lives out the rest of his days in Chicago, and I believe he is buried there in the city of Chicago as well. And one of my favorite people, as I wrap this up, is Reverend George Wesley Allen. Reverend George Wesley Allen was the first worship master of my lodge, Mount Pleasant number 53, in 1888. Reverend Allen was born in Smith Station, Alabama, August 10th, 1850. And when he's describing his life, he states something kind of unusual. While it's suspected that he was being educated, he said that he had private instructions, and his private teachers were all white. So I felt that was kind of odd that you have a black man during slavery saying that all his teachers were white. So he ends up going to Payne University and Wilberforce University in Ohio, and he gets ordained as a deacon in 1892 by Bishop Abraham Grant. Now, this Bishop Abraham Grant is the same Abraham Grant that was Grand Master in Florida and served as Grand Master in Texas. So Reverend Allen is doing so many things. He has He's principal of a school in Phoenix City, Alabama, which at the time was called Girard. He's running for the Alabama State Legislature, and he was involved in the establishment of Tuskegee University. And when it comes to his business affairs, he owns a real estate company in the city of Columbus. And for his workings in the church, he's worked with several committees with a Reverend W.J. Hightower, which Brother Morgan is going to get into Reverend Allen and Reverend Hightower's connection and some of the stuff that they did together. And for the AME side, I always wondered, you have Reverend Allen, who was born in Alabama, who lived in Alabama, who worked in Alabama, did almost everything in Alabama. How did he end up being worship master in a lodge in Columbus, Georgia? Well, the deputy at that time was Professor William H. Spencer, who was also a member of St. James AME. And then the Grand Master at the time was Grand Master William Edward Terry, who was also a member of St. James AME. And so far as my research goes, William Edward Terry is the only only Grand Master that was also a member of the AME Church. So he had these two big AME connections close, so they choose Reverend Allen to become the first worship master of Mount Pisgah Lodge, which was the second lodge established in the city of Columbus. Reverend Allen also becomes editor of the Southern Christian Recorder, which you see in a post earlier. During his time, it was the only newspaper published for Blacks in the Columbus area. So Reverend Allen did a number of things in the city of Columbus. He was really big when it came to the AME ministry, and I thought it was a great connection between what Reverend Allen was doing, who Professor William Spencer was, and also William Terry. So that kind of concludes my presentation about AME connection in the state of Georgia.
Thank you for that, Brother Gilharm. We got a question in. Someone wants to know, are there any places where you can go research more information on the AME Church in the state of Georgia, particularly with regards to AME proceedings or records, or where have you gone to get some of your information on AME Church in the Peach?
Oh, one of the biggest things that I use is Genealogy Bank. I go to genealogybank.com. That website is amazing. If you go to the Savannah Tribune, you'll be able to access all their archives, and they tell you a lot of stuff that was going on with the AME Church. There's a lot of free books. If you go to Google Books and you research AME or AME in the state of Georgia, you go to stuff that's written by Richard Wright. He not only does he give descriptions of what these people are doing, he also gives pictures as well. So my biggest tools are Google Books and Genealogy Bank.
In particular, what I've been doing over in Alabama, a lot of the proceedings of the AME Church are documented. They're some of the old, you can find, there's a website called archive.org, and that's my biggest repository that I use to build a lot of my collection, in particular with some of the older documents. You can go to archive.org. They have copies of the history of the AME Church in Alabama. They have a history of the AME Zion Church. They have the history of the CME Church in America. So a lot of these books are actually digitized where you can go back and read them. Some of the brothers, we had James, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to hold you up. One of the questions was regarding the AME Zion Church. Now, I don't think it's a major part of anybody's presentation, but the AME Zion Church is definitely one of the larger players and also the spread of Prince Hall Freemasonry. So we cannot overlook them. It's not that we're overlooking the AME Zion Church per se. It's that a lot of the conversations that we're having is a lot of the work inside of the states were particularly with the AME churches, and particularly in Georgia as well as Alabama. North Carolina has Reverend Wood. J.W. Hood. You have numerous others as well.
All right, now, Brother Morgan, it's a shameless plug, but one other repositories that I have at my disposal for AME Church history is right here where I'm at, the Columbus Black History Museum and Archives. So we have several things about Big Bethel, St. James, or St. Philip's, and several other AME churches here. So not in addition to the other two things I said, the Columbus Black History Museum is also a repository for me as well.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Brother Gillarm. And thank you again, Brother Collins, for that information. It's greatly appreciated. Man, you guys have laid down some big tracks. So I'm hoping that I can follow up with something strong. So I'm going to do my best. All right. Let's see here. We're going to go to screen share. Let's see here. Okay. You guys should be able to see my screen. Is that correct?
Yep, we got it.
All right, very good. Well, this episode is very personal for me. Anybody who knows me knows that the AME Church and Prince Hall Masonry have a very profound connection for myself personally. And if you don't know, you're going to learn a little something tonight. And some people may learn a thing or two that they didn't know. So the title of my presentation is "The Stone That the Builder Refused," and there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that momentarily. I also want to say that this episode today, as you see, we're kind of focusing on the deep south, southeast. Wasn't planned. It just kind of how it rolled. So we don't want anybody else from any other region to take offense or anything like that. It's just kind of how it rolled this time around. So I wanted to make sure I put that out there also. So we'd be remiss if we didn't acknowledge Bishop Richard Allen, the father of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, and one of the earliest African American Freemasons in this country's history. Prince Hall Masonry and the AME Church in Alabama go hand in hand, as Brother Collins mentioned earlier. Here's a brief timeline. The Alabama was admitted as a state December 14th, 1819. There were some early attempts to establish an AME presence in the city of Mobile as early as 1827, believe it or not, but they were quickly eradicated due to the issues of slavery and free blacks and what are you doing. So it eventually was stamped out until it could be reestablished after the Civil War. Prince Hall Freemasonry in the state officially began in 1867, and then there was a permanent establishment of AME presence in approximately 1868, 1869. There were several AME ministers who were organizers of both Prince Hall Lodges as well as AME Church, people such as Most Worshipful Past Grand Master and Reverend G.W. Bryant. There was Reverend Lazarus Gardner, who's a very, very big figure in AME history of that state, who was a past master of Hiram Lodge number 3. And here we see depicted Reverend M.E. Bryant, who was the first worshipful master of Golden Rule Lodge number 11 in the city of Opelika. The AME Church had a profound history, once again, of leadership, not only within its organization, but also within Prince Hall Freemasonry. Here we see Bishop Wesley J. Gaines, who was alluded to earlier by Brother Gillarm, a member of Phoenix Lodge number 13 under the jurisdiction of Georgia. We have Bishop Abraham Grant, past Grand Master of the jurisdiction of Texas. And we have Bishop Henry McNeil Turner here, who was, believe it or not, he was, and I just found this out recently, originally was a member of Morning Star Lodge number 11 in the state of Virginia, and then later became a member of what's now Pythagoras Lodge number 11 in the state of Georgia. So we see, even though he traveled because of his occupation in the ministry, he took his Masonic membership with him, and we see that it's obviously important. I'd also like to point out, and I think I may have mentioned this on a previous show, that Bishop Turner is actually the father of Dr. John Payne Turner, who is a past Grand Master of the jurisdiction where my membership is, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C. So again, we see this was also a family connection, and we'll see some more family connections as I move forward. One of the first brothers I want to talk about tonight is someone who's not very well known, I think, outside of certain circles, but someone who I find very fascinating, Reverend Brother Winfield Henry Mixon, who was born August 25th, 1859 in Dallas County, near the city of Selma. He was a leading organizer of Payne University, one of the founders of that school, which opened in 1889. So it's kind of going again into Brother Collins' direction, showing the connection with education of blacks in Prince Hall Masonry, as well as with the church. There's a triumvirate there. We see that he served as the first secretary and treasurer of Payne University when it opened. He published, and this is the thing I found very fascinating about him, and you kind of see it in this picture. He was a very scholarly individual. He was a historian in his own right, and so we could almost say that he was a predecessor, if you will, to the Prince Hall think tank. So he published a Methodist Luminary, which is a guide, a step-by-step guide for young men who were interested in going into the ministry, and young women. Step-by-step guide. It was a correspondence courses, books that were required to be read, and et cetera. It's almost like how today we have Kaplan's Guide to get into grad school, stuff like that. That's what a Methodist Luminary is, and it was a very popular text in its day. He also published the history of the AME Church in the state of Alabama. He published that in 1902, and that book greatly influenced me as I read it. And without that book's history, this presentation tonight would not be possible. And he was also a past master of St. Mark's Lodge No. 4 in the city of Selma. He served as Grand Chaplain and eventually became a Right Worshipful Deputy Grand Master for the jurisdiction of Alabama. And again, we see this connection between the leadership of the church and the leadership of the lodge. And I think that that's a key point that we want to keep going back to acknowledge tonight. Here we see a picture of Payne University. The school originally was founded in Selma. Eventually the campus moved to Birmingham, and it shut down, I want to say back in the night, it shut down sometime in about the 1970s. So it's no longer in existence. However, the campus today is actually being planned to be used as a retirement center, and the land itself, I believe, is still owned by the AME Church in Alabama. So the land itself will be carried on in terms of being utilized for service. Here we see a picture of the faculty and class of Payne in 1901. If you see up here, I don't know if you can see my mouse or not, but I'm circling. Here we see Reverend Bishop W.H. Mixon there, right there with the students. And so we see a craftsman at work, at labor. He wasn't just somebody who wrote books or just somebody who sat behind a desk. He was actually there on the ground teaching students, working with them, trying to make sure that they got a quality education. And here we see the product of his labors as well as that of the other faculty members there. Another prominent figure that I want to make sure I highlight tonight, someone who I've spent a good amount of time learning about, is Reverend Still Paul Pryor, who was born March 6, 1867 in Brundage, Alabama. He was the son of Reverend Reuben S. Pryor, who was a Baptist minister, believe it or not. So we see Reverend Pryor, the younger Reverend Pryor, actually converted for whatever reason we may never know. I like to imagine that the idea of joining an independent black organization that was not only centered around the gospel, but was also something that was seen as a self-help organization in many aspects. I think that might have been what could have possibly appealed to someone like Reverend Still Paul Pryor. He was licensed to preach in the year 1891 and was admitted to the Alabama AME conference with Bishop W.J. Gaines presiding. So again, we see some of these same names keep popping up because they're in so many leadership positions. Okay, he actually renamed Colored Methodist Church in the city of Dothan to Gaines Chapel AME. He was ordained an elder by Bishop Henry McNeil Turner in the year 1899, and part of the reason why was because he had a reputation for whatever church he went to, he eliminated church debts and would get them, and he was a financial wizard with churches that weren't doing so well. So that was one of the reasons why he was elevated and why he was so highly sought after as a speaker and as a lecturer because of his administrative skills. He was the founding editor of the Henry County Appeal newspaper and also a charter member of Fairview Lodge number 513 in the city of Dothan. He also served as founding president of the Fairview Land Management Corporation in the city of Dothan, which was one of the first incorporated black corporations in that city, and indeed in Houston County, Alabama, which is in the southeasternmost corner of the state of Alabama. Here we see Gaines Chapel Church in Dothan. This is the church that Reverend Pryor would have pastored in when he was in the city of Dothan. And here we see the parsonage or the minister's home that Reverend Pryor actually built with his own hands at a price of $750 in 1902. And I want to also make sure I mention that I got these two pictures out of the History of African Methodism that was published by Reverend Mixon. So again, we continue to be indebted to our Masonic forefathers for leaving just crumbs and little bits and pieces of information that we're now able to take up and carry on to the next generation. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that both of these pictures were actually taken by Reverend Mixon and placed in his book, which is available if anyone's interested in reading it. Here we have somebody who's very, very special to my heart, and hopefully we will be to yours too. This is actually Reverend William Jefferson Hightower. He was born in Barber County, Alabama, to a formerly enslaved mother and to a white father on January the 12th, 1868. He joined the AME ministry around 1891, and part of the reason why we know that is because he's actually mentioned in a Methodist Luminary, which was written again by Bishop W.H. Mixon. He was appointed to several committees over several churches by Bishops Gaines, Grant, and Turner, just to name a few. He was very, very highly thought of by the leaders in the church in the South. He became a pastor of Gaines Chapel AME in 1902. He was the second pastor, in fact, following after Reverend Pryor. He too was a charter member of Fairview Lodge 513 in Dothan, Alabama, served as a presiding elder, and he is also my direct ancestor. Reverend Hightower is my great-great-great-grandfather. So if there was no Reverend Hightower, there would be no me, and there would be no Prince Hall Think Tank. So if you like Prince Hall Think Tank, you got to thank Reverend Hightower, because if it wasn't for him and his lovely wife Lizzie, I would not be here today to bring you some of this information. So we want to make sure we shout out my ancestor, Reverend Hightower, and Masonic brother. Here is the actual clipping of the membership of Fairview Lodge 513 from the 1913 proceedings of the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama. And we see Reverend Hightower listed here along with Reverend Pryor. And the reason why I wanted to show you this was not just to show you these two individuals, but to highlight something that's very key in studying Prince Hall Masonic history. Dothan, Alabama at that time had other lodges that actually preceded Fairview. One in particular, Zion Fountain 54, had been around for quite some time, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Why would they start another lodge in this small, out of the way city? And the thing that I came to realize was that if you look at these names of some of these other people, the worshipful master, Reverend J.M. Dixon, is a pastor of one of the local Baptist churches. Reverend Monty W. Frazier, right here serving as secretary. Monty W. Frazier actually had been a student of Reverend Hightower and Reverend Pryor. I found that in some AME Church proceedings, but we also see that he's in the lodge here. T.E.H. Dickerson would become, at a later date, a pastor of Gaines Chapel, which would later be renamed Cherry Street AME. Reverend Dickerson was also in the same church as Reverend Pryor and Reverend Hightower. So many of these other men, you see a similarity that a lot of them are deacons and leaders in local black churches. So I said, aha, we have found many of the religious leaders in that city, and they decided to form a lodge unto themselves for whatever reason. So I thought that was quite fascinating discovery to find. And anyone who's from down in that region, you can look on here and you'll probably recognize some of the other names that I don't have time to mention here tonight. Here we see a photograph of the trustees of Payne University. If you can look real close, you'll see Bishop Henry McNeil Turner right here in front of them. This photo was taken, I believe, in 1900. Reverend Hightower, Reverend Pryor, Reverend Mixon, they were all very, very staunch advocates for this school and served as financial trustees and fundraisers for Payne University, as well as a number of other schools. But Payne University had a very, very big place on their trestle board, if you will, because it was the official AME college in the state, established again in 1889. Reverend Hightower and Reverend Pryor and many other ministers actually contributed not only financially to the creation of the school, but with their time and with their talent. They actually helped to get a group of South African students to come to the state of Alabama to study at Payne. Here we see a photograph of those students, which again we were able to find thanks to the work of Reverend Mixon. Reverend Hightower served alongside of Reverend G.W. Allen, who Brother Gillarm mentioned earlier, on a fundraising committee for Payne University that was established in 1903. Reverend Hightower also served as a subscription agent for the Christian Review magazine, and he also attended the 1912 and 1916 AME General Conferences and had been elected as a delegate. In 1906, my ancestor, Reverend Hightower, was elected as a trustee of Payne University. And again, we see that interchange between not only the lodges but also with the academic side and fundraising. And one thing I found fascinating in my research of Reverend Hightower is I kept tripping up on Reverend Mixon, Reverend Pryor, Reverend Allen, and several other names. But they traveled in some of the same circles. Here, this is just a clipping talking about the fact that in 1908, Reverend Hightower decided to actually get rid of the original building of Gaines Chapel Church to build a stronger brick structure that currently is there today. However, the Dothan Brick Factory would not sell him the bricks, even though he had raised money to purchase his materials. They simply told him they wouldn't sell him because he was a Negro and he was trying to build something for Negroes. This didn't stop Reverend Hightower, however, from organizing. They ended up building the new building at a cost of $8,000 in 1908 currency. And Reverend Hightower actually organized the black community in that area to basically, we'll say, liberate bricks from white work sites and abandoned buildings to build this church. Once it was just knocked down and rebuilt from scratch, Reverend Hightower renamed the Gaines Chapel to Cherry Street AME Church upon its completion in 1908. This is one of the earliest pictures of Cherry Street AME, which was the former Gaines Chapel. I'm going to go back to it just so you can see it a little bit better. Not to go too fast. We also see Reverend Hightower and many other brothers interacting within the confines of the AME Church, and sometimes they fought and fell out. And I just want to show this real quick. This was something that Dave and I kind of found kind of funny, because people know Dave and I kind of go back and forth a little bit online from time to time. And again, those are we joke and we jest, but we always remain friends at the end of the day. And so I just want to highlight this part right here of one of the conferences from 1912, where it talks about there being a stormy session at the AME conference. Here we see during yesterday's session, a lively discussion arose over the boundary lines of the East Alabama Conference, while Dr. G.B. West of Montgomery, Alabama, and T.E.H. Dixon, which is supposed to be T.E.H. Dickerson, T.J. Stewart, W.J. Hightower were contending for the disputed territory. Dr. G.W. Allen, Dr. H.C. Calhoun, and Dr. Dan Brown represented the East Alabama Conference. After speeches were delivered on both sides, and Dr. H.C. Calhoun had charged the West faction with robbing and stealing the contending territory, the bishop decided the case in favor of G.B. West's faction and gave the territory to the Alabama Conference. The session was a stormy one. Again, they're fighting, internally within the church leadership over this disputed territory. However, we fight all the time within our lodges. We don't want to admit it, but we do. But at the end of the day, peace and harmony did prevail. And actually, that same year, Reverend Hightower would go to the AME General Conference in Kansas City and be one of the delegates to endorse Reverend George W. Allen to become a bishop, which unfortunately Reverend Allen lost that vote. But again, we see that correspondence, and even though they had a fight, they still were able to come together for a common purpose, even though they didn't succeed in that. This is a photograph of Cherry Street AME Church today. It is the oldest religious structure in the city of Dothan, and it is the mother church of the African Methodist Episcopal denomination in the state of Alabama, again built by my ancestor and Masonic brother, Reverend W.J. Hightower. This is a sign that was just a historical marker that had been erected on the site in the year 1979 by the Chattahoochee Historical Commission there. So if you're ever in Dothan, please feel free to take a look at it. The cornerstone of the church with Reverend Hightower's name on it. The W is kind of hard to see there, but it is there. This is actually a photograph of me last time I was in Dothan in 2014. It is on those very steps that as a young child I actually learned the story of Reverend Hightower from my grandfather, who's also a Prince Hall Mason, and I hadn't been there since I was a child, so I wanted to make sure that I captured that moment sitting in front of that historic church that had that meant so much to my ancestor. I also wanted to make sure I gave a shout out to one of our most loyal fans, which is Reverend James Winfrey, past master of Humphrey's Pride, Dothan's Choice Lodge number 344. Excuse me if I'm missing the name, missing the number. But Reverend Winfrey is actually a past minister of Cherry Street as well, and as well as a Prince Hall Mason, and he was very tireless in helping me over the past several years, believe it or not, in researching Reverend Hightower's life. And he and I got to meet earlier this year out in California, of all places, and I wanted to make sure I thanked him for his hard work for helping myself and my family researching Reverend Hightower's life. If you're ever in the city of Dothan and you want to check out some interesting things, there's a mural exhibit that's ongoing all across the city that preserves a lot of the city's history. And one of the Black History murals that's there is a mural dedicated to the history of Cherry Street AME Church, which is again now it's the oldest religious structure in that city. And here you actually see the young children, and there's a story to it in of itself, the idea of young children playing, but in reality they were actually taking bricks to their brothers and to their fathers to help Reverend Hightower to build this historic Cherry Street AME Church. So again, if you're ever in the city of Dothan and you happen upon that church, just remember that one of your Prince Hall brothers was one of the master builders of that great edifice. And with that, I'm gonna get back to you guys. Let's see here. Am I still broadcasting to you guys?
Yes, you're good to go.
Okay. So I hope you all enjoy that. And before we move on, I just want to make sure that I show everybody, because I know Dave can't do it. I wanted to make sure I at least acknowledge, because I was talking bad about him. I want to make sure at least I acknowledge Reverend Allen. Can you guys see Reverend Allen there?
Yeah, we can see it.
Can see him.
Yeah. So I just want to make sure I at least acknowledged him. And again, one of the things I found interesting about that dichotomy between Reverend Allen and Reverend Hightower is that every step of the way in their careers, and there was much more that I could have gone into, but in the sake of time I didn't. They were side by side. Not only did they fundraise for a Fort Payne University, but in 1904, their committee actually came together in their hotel lodgings the night before the AME conference of the state, and decided that next day when they were giving their report that they would actually basically hold the ministers there hostage and basically told them, they said, well, we raised X amount of dollars, but we feel that we could do more, so why don't everybody empty their pockets right now? And they actually raised several $100s right there on the spot. And that was the idea of Reverend Hightower and Reverend Allen. So again, we see we see them working together, even though at times that they became adversaries, they worked together, and I believe that they probably remained good friends. I also wanted to show everybody just very quickly, I'll kick it back to you guys. This is a clipping. Can you see that there?
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Very quickly, I know it's kind of blurry. I want to show you guys. This is actually a clip from the book A Methodist Luminary, which is again written by Reverend Mixon. And I know you can't see it that well, but this says traveling licentiates. These are new men who are getting ready to go into the ministry, who are just kind of starting out. And if you look very closely here, you'll actually see them in order: G.W. Allen, and in 2 lines down, W.J. Hightower. So from the very beginning, these 2 men were actually kind of fated, I guess you would say, to do their work together. So I just thought that was kind of interesting note. So with that, I will kick it back to you guys.
And I also would be remiss if I did not mention this other Georgia bishop, and it was Bishop Joseph Simeon Flipper. He was a member of St. James AME, and he was the younger brother to Henry O. Flipper. And if you're not familiar with who Henry O. Flipper is, he was the first African American graduate of West Point. So then we have his little brother becoming an AME bishop and later becoming deputy grand master of what's now the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Georgia. So now we'll get into some questions where I have to turn it back over to Brother Ken Collins.
Okay, we had some questions regarding, and again, for us to be able to, again, in one episode, it's kind of hard to hit on everything because everyone has their own particular issue area that they want to hit on, and there's some areas that we did not cover, in particular, in depth on the AME Zion or the Baptist Church, in particular, again, the states that we're talking about. The greatest influence, and I can say in Alabama, was particularly the AME Church, because you also had Brother William Hooper Council, who was who got the Alabama A&M, my alma mater, the school up and running. He was actually one of the deacons there in the northern part of the state. So we missed that. Of course, we didn't touch on anything, but that's not at all a slight to any of the Presbyterian, the AME Zion, the Baptist, the Southern Baptist, any of the other denominations. Just a particular correlation between AME itself and the other, and that's why I hit off of CME, because it's a rarely discussed intersection. One of the questions was, has anyone contacted Mother Bethel Church regarding some of her proceedings and in minutes, church minutes?
I'll take that. I actually have. Mother Bethel has a archive there with Miss Jerido, who's been very good to me. Their archive, to my knowledge, is very localized to Mother Bethel and to the surrounding churches in that area, which is good, especially if you're researching that. And I believe they have a museum there and whatnot as well. But if you're researching other areas like myself, and Dave and Ken, who kind of have focused a lot of our AME research in the Deep South, you really need to get familiar with websites like Genealogy Bank, which I have found to be amazing for Deep South AME records. Newspapers.com, stuff like that. You're going to find a lot of stuff in newspapers. I would also say get familiar, if you're interested in researching your lodge's history or your jurisdiction's history with regards to some of the churches. You really want to familiarize yourself with the modern day leadership of some of these churches. Like the AME Church has a historiographer's office that you can actually call up and say, hey, I need some help with this. Here in DC, we have, I know that there are several AME churches also that are connected with some of our lodges, and we've gone and actually contacted some of the pastors there and said, hey, do you have a church historian? Do you have a library? What, if not, what do you have? And to really build that relationship. And I think that's one of the keys about history that we talked about, maybe I think even on the first episode, is have a relationship with some of these archives, these churches, these repositories. Another thing that we're working on here in DC at the moment is identifying our cornerstones of various churches that the Grand Lodge and some of the lodges have laid, and trying to go back to them and say, hey, do you guys have any records that we don't have of that event? Let's get an interchange going. And also with St. James, I'm down there in Columbus. Dave actually put me onto that, and I contact them all the time now. So yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing that you said, James. I personally haven't contacted Mother Bethel, but we did, both myself and James did talk to some of the AME church historians to see what they had as far as pictures, proceedings. And my go-to place here is St. James AME. From the time that I got into their archives with Dr. Judy Purnell, they gave me full access. They helped me out with any question I asked. And while I was headed to the church, I believe I was talking to James on the phone, and he said that they actually thought that when he called that he was me, because I called there so much. You want to say something, James?
You know what? I'm gonna subdue my passions.
So, yeah, St. James AME is definitely one of my best repositories as well. All right, Ken, we got the next question.
I got a question here. I guess I'll throw it Ken's way. Where was Bishop Henry McNeil Turner from originally? And can somebody, I guess Ken, maybe you can touch on it. Can somebody touch on his Civil War service that was mentioned earlier, and some of his other exploits?
One thing, if I remember correctly, Bishop Turner was born free in South Carolina, and he becomes a minister at a young age, and he also was educated. Then he gets appointed as when the Civil War breaks out, he gets appointed as the chaplain for the Union Army. After the war, he was appointed chaplain of the regular army, but I believe he later declined this position to go back to work for the church. Once he comes back to the South, one of the things that he does, he's heavily involved in the Macon area. He serves as postmaster. He ends up in Savannah, and he comes to Columbus, where now he's traveling with, and this is around 1868 time frame. He's traveling with a guy named George Ashburn. George Ashburn was white, but he was the military leader of Columbus. And George Ashburn is also the first person on record that the Klan killed in the state of Georgia. And the night that they spoke, which is in downtown Columbus, George Ashburn gets killed that night. So that's just, I guess, kind of touch on some of the stuff that Henry McNeil Turner did. I know he spent some time in D.C. as well. And I think, James, you had some stuff on Bishop Turner?
No, I'm sorry. Just to jump in real quick, Bishop Turner. The funny thing is when I got involved with the U.S. colored troops at D.C. That James got me involved with at the African American Civil War Memorial. That's actually the person that the soldier that I played with the U.S. colored troops, and in particular in D.C. And James, I'll leave the D.C. part with you. What he does also throughout the state of Alabama is he's the one that's doing a lot of the appointing, and he's also doing a lot of the organization of the Back to Africa movement in Mobile. So he's actually setting up missions for African Americans or Africans to go back to Liberia to set up those missions. He does it in Mobile, and actually in one of the documents regarding Simon S. Ash, he speaks of this is Bishop Turner speaks of his interaction with Simon Ash, and he meets him at a church function, at an AME church function. And he goes to his house, and he speaks of how highly respected this man of color is, and that his home is bigger than any of the other whites' homes in Mobile. And remember, Mobile is the post quote unquote post-colonial French city, where his home is larger than the city, and he talks about how much he's making, anywhere between $2,000 to $8,000 a year, more than most of the whites at the time. But something in particular, this really the connection between Prince Hall Masonry per se and Dr. Turner is, at the same time, Simon Ash is already a Freemason in Louisiana. He's out of a lodge in Louisiana, but they live in Mobile. So there's a handful of Freemasons already there. And when McNeil Turner is there during the late 1850s, he's actually interacting with one of his Masonic brothers. So the question can be posed, is this part of the connection that they had? Because at Simon Ash's death, you end up seeing Dr. Turner actually writes a beautiful soliloquy inside of the Christian Recorder. And he's the one that actually wrote the, I guess, the obituary on Bishop McNeil Turner. I mean, on Simon Ash. That was a good correlation between, you know, the state of Alabama, because you never saw him up in northern Alabama. He was mostly down. I've never seen any documents of him further north of Montgomery, even though Birmingham wasn't really Birmingham back then. It was Illaton Village. But you never saw him further north of Birmingham. He was more in the Dothan, Selma, Montgomery, as well as Mobile areas.
Very cool. Yeah, the only thing I could add to that regarding Bishop Turner is that he definitely, he was a big organizer for the first DC United States Colored Troops. He had served as pastor. I believe it was Israel AME, if I'm not mistaken. Something interesting that I found recently in reviewing some of our recently recovered proceedings of Prince Hall Grand Lodge of DC is that he actually was present at the chartering of Meridian Lodge number 6, which still exists here in the District of Columbia, and that was something I thought was really interesting. He wasn't a member, as far as we know, or anything like that, but you know, as I said earlier, his son John Payne Turner becomes a Grand Master here, and so when I found Bishop Turner in 1869 at one of our new lodges being formed events, I was like, wow, you know, I wasn't expecting that at all. But he was definitely a big figure. He worked very closely with one of my favorite Prince Hall Masons of the past, John T. Costin. Both of them actually traveled south together and were eventually elected to the Georgia legislature together as well and served. And I've actually found a couple of clippings in the past of John T. Costin defending Bishop Turner for something he might have said, and as well as other ones where Bishop Turner is defending John T. Costin for radical things that he may have said. And so I thought that was kind of funny to, you know, to be able to find those kind of correlations. Honestly, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner is, in my opinion, one of the greatest Prince Hall Masons that ever lived. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, we could do a whole episode just on him alone. But I definitely appreciate that question coming through for sure.
Just one last thing on Turner. There was a big fight. You know, we got to put this in there. There's the big fight between two Prince Hall Masons in the state of Alabama. Well, it's in the state of Alabama. Henry McNeil Turner and Booker T. Washington. There was a lot of animosity between those two. We got to throw that one in there. Sorry about that, Dave.
Oh no. And one other thing to add in, it was post-Civil War, but it's kind of connected to the Civil War. So at a meeting, and shout out to Lewis Hayden Lodge number 6, they did some excellent record keeping over the years. The oldest active black cemetery in Columbus is named Porterdale Cemetery, after past master Richard Porter of Lewis Hayden. And when Richard Porter was initiated in 1871, Bishop Turner came here to Columbus and he served as a junior deacon. Now, what's interesting about that meeting is you have Reverend James Sims, who was the Grand Master, a former Union soldier and a former slave, sitting in the East. And in the West, you have, as a senior warden, you have Horace King, former Confederate Navy and a slave owner. Then you have Bishop Turner, Union Army, Union soldier, abolitionist, as the junior deacon. And they're all together in this meeting at the time that Richard Porter is initiated. And I thought that was one of the most interesting things regarding Bishop Turner's history.
Very, very cool. Very cool. Do we have any other questions coming through? I think I see one. I see someone actually has a question for me. They say, this is coming from Brother Charles Thomas. Worshipful Master Morgan, it is my understanding that the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of D.C. was at one point the oldest Prince Hall Grand Lodge in the South. I would have thought that the extension would have its roots with the black seminaries in this area. I understand that question correctly. Yeah, I mean, with Prince Hall Masonry in D.C., one thing that you find is there's definitely an abolitionist lean with some of our earliest members, and they're definitely dedicated churchmen particularly in the area, particularly with regards to Hiram Lodge number 4, which was the first chartered lodge in our jurisdiction. You have men like Clement Beckett, who's actually a builder of churches himself. You have other men such as past Grand Master Robert Henry Robinson, who was our 4th Grand Master, who's a minister in his own right, who's not an AME minister, but he actually works with, I believe, the United Methodist Church. His church still exists down in Alexandria. You have many members who are members of Israel, AME, which was here in the city. You had Ebenezer, Mount Zion, which is in Georgetown, and several other places. I'm trying to think in my head, outside of Reverend Past Grand Master Robinson, of other ministers, and I'm sure there's some names that are slipping my mind at the moment. But there definitely is a huge connection between the early black churches here in the District of Columbia, as well as our Grand Lodge here. I will give a shout out to a reference that you can go back to look at on your own time, which is actually written by a Prince Hall Mason, by Charles H. Wesley, who was a member of Hiram Lodge number 4, ironically. It's the History of Negro Churches in the District of Columbia, which was published, I believe it's in volume 7 of the Journal of Negro Life and History, where Dr. Wesley goes in deep detail about the early formation of the black churches here in the district. And if you know the names to look for, you start cross-referencing the names, you'll see a lot of them are members of Social number 1, Universal number 2, Felix number 3, or Hiram 4, and then later on Eureka 5 when they come online. So you will see that correlation here as well as in other parts of the country.
So I take it, Brother James, does that wrap up our questions for tonight?
I believe so. Let's see. Any other questions? Going once, going twice. I think that's it for tonight. Oh wait, I got something else. Oh, someone did. Someone else did send a message, and I guess this one's aimed for me again. It says, was Reverend Hightower's ministry ever threatened by the KKK or it says or Confederate groups? The Confederacy was not in existence. Reverend Hightower was born right after the Civil War, so the Confederacy would not have played a role in that. But as far as his ministry being threatened by the Klan, there is an interesting story that I will share with you all. I wasn't going to talk about it tonight. This doesn't necessarily concern Reverend Hightower, but it does concern his wife, my great-great-great-grandmother, Lizzie. Lizzie Hightower, I gather from her, she seems to be a little more outspoken than him to some degree. Like, she seems a little, just the way I read some of her material, she reminds me of myself sometimes. She just kind of speaks from the heart. I'll say it like that. There's one clipping I found of her in the Christian Recorder where they make mention of her actually speaking up against the Klan and against lynchings, and she says that it's the responsibility of the Negro woman to stand beside her men, beside her husbands, her father, her brothers, and against this great injustice. And then basically she says something to the effect of, if the Klan ever wants to try to come get her, before they do, she'll unload every shell in her shotgun the way her daddy had taught her. So when I read that, I was like, wow, my grandmother was, she was down with thug life. And I could kind of, this is just how I imagine it. In my mind, I could see her saying that, and I could see Reverend Hightower kind of be like, all right, baby, time to go home. But to speak on the Klan for just a second, those kind of threats were real for Prince Hall lodges, not only in the Deep South but elsewhere, as well as with the spread of black churches, and we know that we kind of spoke on that a couple episodes ago. But those kind of threats were definitely things you had to consider. From what I've known or what I've researched of Reverend Hightower thus far, I haven't seen any real, not to say that it didn't happen, but I haven't seen any real racial collision with regards to his ministry or any opposition to it with his professional work as a pastor. But you do see some issues that have arisen between the family internally, because again, and I didn't get too much into the details in the presentation of this, but Reverend Hightower, again, his mother is a former slave, is a black woman. His father was a Caucasian by the name of Robert T. Hightower, And the story goes that Reverend Hightower actually was raised by both his parents and was acknowledged basically as being the son of this Caucasian man, and he was basically raised in his house. Although it wasn't openly acknowledged, it was kind of hush hush. But his education, everything, he basically was taken care of by his father. And I can imagine, given the time period, when he was growing up, that might have caused some tension. I mean, he had black siblings and he had white siblings, and he's kind of stuck in the middle. And I can definitely imagine that some of his white siblings or playmates or other relatives in the family might not have taken too kindly to that, particularly because he carried on the name Hightower, which was not his mother's last name at all, or any of his black siblings' name at all. So that's just kind of my speculation. But even down to today, as a researcher, when I go to research his life and I contact some of those distant family members, there's still some tension there, which I won't speak on tonight in the essence of time. But yeah, I guess I kind of finish it there.
All right, thank you for that, Brother Morgan. And as far here in the great state of Georgia, we did have a couple of threats. I mentioned earlier with Bishop Henry Neal Turner and also Reverend James Sims.
Wait, I'm sorry. I left one thing out. I'm sorry. I left one thing out. Thank you for saying Bishop Turner. Something I left out in the presentation, which was actually a recent discovery for me, was that in 1896, Reverend Hightower and Reverend Pryor had served as marshals for the AME conference, which was here in Alabama, and they did kind of serve on a security detail, so to speak, for Bishop Turner. I forgot about that, so let me insert that. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine. Now, I was reading something where Bishop Turner, when he come into town, he would stay out in the woods until nighttime. Then he would come in because the Klan had made threats on him. And I saw something that was kind of odd in Bradwell's minutes, is that when Bishop Turner would come in, there was no indication of where he was staying at. Now, Reverend Sims, our first Grand Master, was very open. He spoke openly in the Klan in the papers. He just didn't care about anything. Now, in the minutes, it always said where he was staying at, when he came in town, he stayed with Reverend Bradwell, but Bishop Turner is never mentioned. It's never mentioned where he was staying at. All right, so now we're going to go ahead and move to wrapping up for the night. We thank you all for tuning in tonight. Hopefully, you all got something out of tonight's presentation. This was a very, I guess, intimate subject for a lot of us, because the AME Church has been so influential with the spread of Prince Hall Masonry. So now, to get the final remarks, we have Brother Ken Collins.
Well, everybody, again, we want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and we're trying to cover a lot of different issues that we typically don't talk about. Of course, there's some areas that we're not going to hit up, but if you have some recommendations or possible show ideas, please feel free to drop an inbox to Dave, James, myself, or Preston. We try to cover them. Like I said, I enjoyed this. This is something that I'm really interested in particular, the correlation between the church as well as Prince Hall Freemasonry, but also that third triad of being the correlation between education. It's a big piece in the Prince Hall, I guess, playbook. Last thing before I get off here. The Prince Hall Americanism Day Classic is going to be held down the weekend of September 23rd, 24th, 25th in Montgomery, Alabama. Please feel free to visit the Prince Hall Grand Lodge website. In addition, on October the 5th, on the campus of Alabama A&M University, the Prince Hall Grand Lodge of Alabama will be laying a wreath at the tomb of one of our deceased brethren, the Honorable Dr. William Hooper Council, and we'll also be doing a check presentation for a scholarship there. So if you can, please feel free to come out. It will be a formal event. We'll be dressed in black and whites as we're giving what we call the secondary last rites, that of a wreath laying ceremony for our deceased brother. But as usual, thank you for tuning in, and also don't forget, if you see a book, read it. All right, thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Brother Collins. Brother Morgan.
Man, you know, every time I do we do one of these guys, I feel just a little more enlightened for the next 30 days, and I just want to say thank you all for once again allowing me to be on here with you guys. This is a great endeavor I think that we're undertaking. This obviously was very intimate for me, and speaking on Reverend Hightower, and a lot of folks know me for my genealogy research and whatnot. And Reverend Hightower, to be honest with you, as I said earlier, I mean, I was introduced to understanding my own family history when I was about 6 years old, right there on the steps of Cherry Street AME. Little did I know that 14 years later, when I was 21 years old, that I would become a Master Mason. And little did I know that Reverend Hightower had also crossed through those same doors and knelt at the same altar that I had. And so when I discovered that, thanks to the help of Brother Collins, it really made me feel a more intimate connection to him, as not only as a relative, but also as a Masonic brother. And I can remember when I first saw his face, I was like, "Whoa, I don't look nothing like that guy," So it just made me feel a little more at home, and I'm very appreciative for you all letting me to kind of share that story with you, because again, it is very personal. Again, I just want to let everybody know that I will be back on here next month with you guys, but I'll be a little older. My birthday is September 19th, so you guys have forewarning. I do take I take cash, I take checks, I do take gift cards, but my birthday is on the 19th. So and also too, just let you guys know what's going on in my life. As I mentioned earlier, I'm active with genealogy research, and I will actually be speaking this coming Friday at the International Black Genealogy Symposium, where my topic will actually be finding our fathers, black fraternal organizations, and your genealogy research. So we move not only online, but we move in reality, and I'm looking very forward to sharing this kind of niche level of research with all those in attendance. And if you're in the area and you want to stop by, we'll be at the Crystal Gateway in Arlington, Virginia. So check us out. And with that, I'll see you guys next month.
Thank you for that, Brother Morgan. Yeah, I definitely enjoy this show. Every time I get around you guys, I learn so much about our history. Some of the upcoming things that we have going on in the great state of Georgia, and you probably see me posting about it, is we've now started the Georgia Masonic Tours. The first tour is going to start on September 24th, and it's going to be in Atlanta. More details are going to come out, but I'm pretty sure it's going to start at 330 Auburn Avenue, and which was our old Grand East. This is also right down the street from the King Center, and right on the corner, across the street from the statue of past Grand Master John Wesley Dobbs. The Atlanta Masonic Tours you would not want to miss. You're going to get to visit some of the graves of Bishop Wesley John Gaines, Bishop Joseph Simeon Flipper, Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, Daddy King, so many other people. So you would not want to miss that one. The Columbus Masonic Tour is going to start on October 27th. I will be hosting that one personally. We're going to start at 815 6th Avenue, which is the Prince Hall Masonic Temple. We're going to go to several other locations, and we're going to finish up back at the Prince Hall Masonic Temple. From Columbus, we're looking at doing the third tour in Augusta, followed by Macon, and then Savannah. So more details are going to come out about these tours, and we're going to continue to go until we have a tour for every district in the state of Georgia. For next month marks our 100th anniversary. Well, sorry, not 100th. 1 year anniversary.
Speak it into existence, Dave. Speak it into existence. We'll be here 100 years from now.
Yeah. Yeah, our 1 year anniversary of the Prince Hall Think Tank. For the new viewers, the Prince Hall Think Tank was a brainchild of Brother Antonio Caffey. feel free to look him up on Facebook. Drop some inboxes to him. He loves it when you flood his inbox. So give a shout out to Brother Caffey, because without him thinking of this, we would have never been in the position that we are now.
Free Caffey.
So in commemoration of the 1-year anniversary, we're gonna do a couple things that we've never done before on this show. The first thing is we're gonna have our first female guest on the show. Since everything is in order, I can go ahead and announce her. It's Sister Victoria Brown. She's a past matron out of Iowa, and she served as Grand Secretary for Iowa as well. So she will be our first female guest. And the other person he's a well-known person. Until we get more in detail with him, then we're gonna announce who it is. But that one you will not want to miss next month's show. We're gonna make the history books with our second guest. And as always, feel free to shoot us your comments, your questions. If you have any suggestions for upcoming shows, hit us up. We're pretty accessible, and we look forward to seeing you all next month. And good night.
Good night, everybody.